I'm Sasha Nicole.
And I'm Star.
And I'm Dr. T.
And this is Amerikan Therapy, the definitive podcast on all things Black mental health. And I know we keep saying, oh, we have a great guest every time, but really, we do. We always have some great guests, and we're extremely happy, besides seeing Star in her lovely outfit. Oh my gosh. Star, what we doing today?
Okay, so today we are talking all things environmental justice. So many of us grew up in neighborhoods or communities that are probably near factories and industrial facilities. That's not by accident. So we're going to learn about how environmental justice ties into mental health and just being Black in America.
Absolutely. So we have an amazing guest today. We have Catherine Coleman Flowers, who is the founder of the Center for Rural Enterprise and Environmental Justice, which seeks the implementation of best practices to address the reduction of health and economic disparities, improve access to clean air, water, and soil in marginalized rural communities by influencing policy, inspiring innovation, catalyzing relevant research, and amplifying the voices of community leaders. This is done within the context of climate change and through the lens of environmental justice. She has a book that is coming out in just a few months, which is entitled Waste: One Woman's Fight Against America's Dirty Secret, which, as mentioned, will be published this fall. And so a lot of us, Catherine, I know even for myself, I always have this running saying, every city that I go to, I don't care where it is, whatever state, I always say, go to the other side of the railroad track. And that's where we can find our people. And that even when I was in Iowa, everywhere, even the most, rural areas, it always seems to be this definitive line of where, Black people are, or lower class in terms of economics. So tell us, what exactly is environmental justice and why is it important in our community?
Well, environmental justice generally speaks to us, and you just described it perfectly. When you go to areas where people generally don't have a voice, and you would find that that's where they put the dirty plants or the landfills, or that's where they want to deposit the trash, and that's where we're more likely to find the water polluted. A great example for us to look at is Flint, Michigan, and the fact that they just got some type of reparation for what happened with the $600 million that was just awarded because of what happened in Flint. And the communities that I've seen that generally are suffering are communities like in Cancer Alley, which is in Louisiana, which I think when I went to St. James and St. John's Parish, especially St. James Parish, you can see where the old plantations used to be, where Black people worked in the fields, and now those plantations are being sold to factory owners that are building some of the dirtiest factories in the world in this area. And they're all clusters. To me, it's like going to Disney World. And you go to Disney World, you see, all these different children go there for all these different amusements. There you see all these factories that are killing people. And they produce materials that we probably use in most things, but those materials are at a price, and it's to the price of people in those local areas. So environmental justice issues you will find throughout throughout areas where people either are economically depressed, or people of color where they've always felt that it was okay to put these plants in those areas because they don't listen to them, and local people don't have a say, or they sell them by saying they're going to bring jobs, but they don't talk about the death and destruction that they bring as well. And it doesn't have to be a plant that with smokestacks in the air that we imagine. It could be the hog farms that are in Eastern Carolina. Same thing, where people there are having problems with the smells of the animals that are factory farmed, and then whenever there's a storm coming off the Atlantic, they can't drink the water because the water gets contaminated with the feces that's coming from those areas. Or it could be like Centerville in Illinois, where I went to, is about 20 minutes outside of St. Louis, where I saw more raw sewage on the ground there than I saw in Lowndes County, Alabama. Or it could be like the Central Valley, Allensworth, which was founded as the first Black town or settlement in California that would have been the Tuskegee of the West. There's an interesting story around Allensworth, but because of big roars there have taken so much water out of the land, out of the ground, that the groundwater has naturally forming arsenic that is that is now poisonous because the parts of the arsenic are greater than the parts of the water. So water has to be brought in because they cannot drink the water out of the ground. So environmental justice shows up in so many different ways, but one of the things that's really clear that it shows up in communities, whether they're rural or urban, where people are deemed to be powerless, there's systematic racism at play, or economic inequality.
How does something like this, I mean, we all kind of know, but can you tell our audience, and us, educate us on how these things happen? How is this legal? And why is it accidental that all these things, these negative, environmental negative factors reside in our communities, and predominantly the Black community and poor communities of America? How is this legal, and what do we do about it? Can we fight it?
I think we can fight it. I think that we fight it by shining the light on it. A lot of these issues are occurring. I mean, in some cases, the politicians that are sitting in the room making the deal look like us, and they're being sold. Part of it is being wrapped in this is economic development and it's providing jobs. And even if the jobs are killing people, they want to be able to talk that they brought so many jobs and they raise the income levels. But if people can't live a decent standard of living, have a decent standard of living, a quality of health, which is part of a standard of living because of what's located there, then it's not a good deal for the community. Also, in a lot of cases, they're taking away the community's right to choose because, everybody has not in my backyard. And so they go to places where they feel like they're going to have least resistance. And they go to places where people don't have a lot of options in terms of economic opportunity and economic development. So the way we fight this is to make sure that, first of all, we amplify the voices of people in the communities and make sure that they have a say in what's located in their backyard, no matter who they are. Is this legal? I mean, we're seeing the dismantling of a lot of laws that were put in place and policies that were put in place to protect, marginalized communities. I mean, right now, it seems like everything is for sale, with the current government. You can see where, now they've opened up the Arctic refuge for looking for oil. I mean, so it's the same kind of mentality, is that people want to make money, but the folk that are making money are not the people that's living in the communities that are suffering. The people that live in the communities that are suffering usually live in other places. Now, my particular role in this, I'm not an expert on air pollution. There are a lot of people that are doing that kind of work and been doing that kind of work for a long time, like Dr. Beverly Wright and Dr. Robert Bullard. My work has been on wastewater. I've been dealing with something that most people don't address or deal with, and that is primarily rural communities or communities of color or poor white communities in a lot of cases. You see this in West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, where they do not have adequate wastewater infrastructure. They're either straight piping the effluent from their homes out onto the ground, or they have failing systems that were sold to these small towns and had to be approved by the state or some state entity in some case. Or even they had to borrow money to put it in place, but they're not sustainable, they're not green, and it's creating problems. And some of the problems that we've seen, that it comes back into people's homes. So,
Ms. Flowers, when you say wastewater, are you literally meaning like the water from the toilet is going straight? That's what?
yes, I'm talking about the
Wow.
water from the toilet. When they straight pipe it, that means when they flush the toilet, it goes straight out into the ground. I've also seen it where when people flush the toilet, when their septic systems are full of water or whatever, or they fail, it comes back into their homes. And I've seen where people are paying wastewater treatment fees and a part of a utility, if you will. And the utilities, the systems that they're using, technology has failed, and that technology brings the sewage back into the home. And earlier you talked about mental health. Just imagine the kind of mental health, anxiety, the type of anxiety that a person has to experience when they live in a place where they know if it rains a lot and their septic system fails, that it's sewage, they can come back home and their house will be full of what was in the toilet, or walking. I've actually gone into homes where people have had the sewage to back up, and they couldn't smell it because they're so used to it, but you can smell it when you walk in there. I think that those are the kinds of things that we haven't even looked at or examined, the kind of anxiety that it caused, not to mention the health problems that it caused to be exposed to raw sewage. And one of the things that I was engaged in, which kind of brought us to national prominence, is when we did the parasite study with Baylor's National School of Tropical Medicine. And we actually found evidence of hookworm and other tropical parasites in some of the people that are living in Lowndes County that are dealing with raw sewage. And now with COVID-19, we're finding that the research has shown that feces can share COVID. And you can also test the wastewater in a community to determine the level of contagion before it starts to show up. You know, before individuals start go and get tested. They're doing this around the world in terms of trying to find a way to deal with it. And if we have communities where people are actually living with sewage coming back into their homes, whether it's their own sewage coming back into the homes or sewage that's coming back from, in the case I've seen people that live next to sewage lagoons for the whole town, and the sewage comes back into their house or is in their yards.
Dr. T, I mean, you know, with that said, it's like, where do you even begin to address that from a mental health standpoint? It's like, you know, like Ms. Flowers said, the anxiety, I can only imagine, like, when we think of so many things in the US, we don't think of that.
Mhm.
That's a tough one. How do you even begin to address that from a mental health standpoint?
I think that it's just another thing that we have to help our families understand is important, because, as I think about it, like when we think about letting our kids go outside and play, we're thinking about safety, green, fields, and that's important. But if there is like sewage, you can't let the kids go out the house, but they also can't stay in the house. It's like you're trapped. And that is a high burden on parents who want the best for their kids, and for kids who can become, anxious and scared. Like, why can't I go outside? What's wrong? Moms and dads always want to protect their kids from reality, right? So they may minimize why you can't go outside, but kids are smart, right? Kids are always smarter than we think. So, always trying to acknowledge that this is real, everybody do their best. But this is really tough, because this is one of those things, when I was thinking of, environmental justice, I was thinking of like, they don't have enough parks, they don't have enough bike paths, but this is way more serious and complicated than that. And the families that, all of us are affected, because those plants affect everyone. But the people who live closest to them, of course, are much more disproportionately affected. So it definitely could affect everyone, but definitely the people that live the closest have a much bigger burden to bear. And then if you think about it, they're also bearing so many other burdens. How do they find the energy? How do they know what to advocate for? How do they know what meetings to show up for? Ms. Flowers, like, how do they get involved to try to prevent this from happening? That might be one strategy to help, with your mental health, a sense of powerlessness. You can fight that by trying to advocate, but how would people know where to go and fight?
Well, basically, in the book, I tell my own story. I grew up with parents that were activists in Lowndes County, Alabama. My father was a native of Lowndes County, and he moved the family back to Lowndes County in the 1960s. And Lowndes County is located between Selma and Montgomery. So, I kind of grew up in the hotbed of that. And a lot of people from SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, were like, regulars that come to our home. And a lot of the local people that were engaged ended up becoming, famous for their activism. And I had the good fortune of being around all of that. And it kind of just evolved. And my parents were like the jailhouse lawyers of our community. Every time somebody had a problem, they would go there and they would try to help them figure it out. And I realized it's not rocket science. Sometimes you just have to do something. And for me, even dealing with COVID right now, I am just such an activist that I have to find ways to still be engaged and involved. And sometimes I'm working 7 days a week now because, you know, it's just so critical and crucial. Right now, what they're dealing with, a lot of people have COVID. Lowndes County has the highest infection rate per capita in the state of Alabama. Lowndes County also has the largest death rate per capita in the state of Alabama. So how do we deal with that? We have to find ways in which to stay engaged despite the fact that we're under siege right now. So what we're doing is we're helping families by, we had some benefactors to reach out to us. There was a PBS NewsHour report on one of the persons who work with me, who is also a distant relative, who passed away from COVID. So what we are doing is, and she's kind of like become the Fannie Lou Hamer of the New Poor People's campaign. And what we're doing is making sure that people are informed about how to protect themselves from COVID, making sure when benefactors want to help people, we're giving out names of families who have been impacted, and they're either telling their stories to the national media. In some cases, people have sent them gifts to help them through this period because if they're sick, they can't work. And a lot of people are unable to kind of go out, and they can't go shopping, especially if you're in an area that's a food desert. So those are ways in which we can help. And we're also looking down the road, we're looking at how can we best use this moment to dramatize what's going on, to make sure that this does not happen again. How do we get people involved in policy making? And at this moment, I mean, I listened to the Democratic convention this week, and it was good to hear environmental justice more than one time. You know, usually you don't hear it once, but to hear it, you know, hear it mentioned more than once. And I think that, and even talk about something like COVID and the impact that it's having on communities. So get involved. The most basic thing that anybody can do when they feel overwhelmed and can't do anything else is to vote. I think if you feel like if you can't knock on doors and you feel like your health, you don't jeopardize your health and come in contact with people right now, there are numerous Zoom meetings. There are all kinds of ways in which to meet now, even if you just have a phone and just call in. There are ways to get involved with various groups. But there's also, but the most basic thing that all of us can do that I think that will impact policies in this country around environmental justice, whether it's wastewater or anything else, is to vote. That's the most basic thing that we can all do, and probably the most important thing that we can do.
Catherine, I spent a year working, I used to work at General Electric years ago, and one of my first years there, I worked for Steve Ramsey, I think it was Stephen Ramsey. He was like the former, and just left EPA as the head of EPA, and I worked at all the GE Superfund sites. And so my heart is sinking when you said there was sewage coming in and wastewater, because one of the things that work in that year of going around the world, they would be like, oh, this can't be cleaned up. Or this can't be, we'll throw some money or, some studies and tests, but they dumped in the Hudson River and other stuff like that, chemicals that couldn't be removed from, you could do certain things, but really and truly, you couldn't do anything about it. So in that instance, my heart hurts, because what should if we got families down there in the Delta or families living in Flint, is it time for us to ask for a fund to help us move out of these places? Because I know from a Superfund perspective, it was oh, this can't be resolved, but not in our lifetime.
Yeah. But there are things that can be resolved. Actually, there's an example in South Carolina where they actually cleaned up a Superfund site and it was repurposed. So they can be resolved. I think the government just doesn't want to pay the money to be able to resolve it. I think we have to have the will. It's just like when we look at wastewater and what I usually say, if we can treat wastewater in outer space to drinking water quality, why can't we invent a toilet that when we flush it, clean water comes out? Especially at a time when water is becoming even more scarce. and make it available where you can go to a Lowe's or a Home Depot and buy it. We got to start thinking out of the box. We got to start thinking green. We got to start thinking about sustainability. And we have to start thinking about, as we talk about a Green New Deal, we got to start thinking how we build better and build differently. Because what we keep doing is building back the same thing. Right now, there are 3 storms like in the Gulf that's coming this way, you know, and not in the Gulf, but it's in the Caribbean, coming this way. And if those 3 storms come and those areas are destroyed, if they end up becoming hurricanes, and those areas are destroyed, why don't we build the same thing back for the next storm? Because it happens every year, and the storms get stronger every year. I remember when I went to Europe for the first time, and I saw 1,000-year-old buildings. We don't have I know we're not that old, but we don't have buildings here as old as the United States because we don't build it to last. We build it, we have this planned obsolescence where we want everything to tear up so you can spend more money. We have to change that. And we also have to stop making people sacrifice zones and making it like it's supposed to be okay for it to happen there, but it's not okay to happen in that neighborhood because they're more affluent. So we have to, I think it's that kind of thinking that we have to stop doing. And I think and starting with our government, we got to have policies in place that promote life. Life isn't about whether or not you can have an abortion. Life is what happens after the baby gets here. You know, whether or not that child has access to, as the UN Sustainable Development Goals talk about, number 6 is to access the human right to water and sanitation. Everybody should have a right to that. I mean, we shouldn't plan poverty to be part of our system and accept it as being okay, or that it's okay to be able to stop people in the street who are people of color, and then they're executed and it's okay for something simple, you know, but you put a man in jail for killing a dog. Something about our thinking has to change and refocus, that we start to respect the humanity of everybody. And once we start doing that, we won't have environmental justice issues. We won't have criminal justice issues. We won't have racial justice issues. But as long as there are people who are of the mindset, as Dr. King calls it, this I-thou relationship, we're going to continue to have these problems.
What do we like? I mean, this is so heavy. Like, how do you keep yourself and how do activists like you keep yourself well and mentally well in the midst of this daunting fight?
I've been fighting for a long time. So what I do, I pray a lot. You know, I think of myself as, I think about, you know, I look at, I'm very Southern, and I grew up in church, and what I see some people purporting as church and Christianity now is very different from what I was raised to believe, and also my own reading of the Bible instead of somebody trying to interpret it for me. And I looked at the stories like, you know, the story of David and Goliath, and what we're dealing with is it's kind of these Goliaths who really have just, in some cases, have gone unopposed. And I feel that with prayer, my favorite psalm is the 91st Psalm. And whenever I get anxious, I read that. And then I go out there to do whatever, to confront whatever I have to confront. I think we also have to have time, those of us that are in it all the time. For my birthday, which was August the 14th, I took time off to do nothing. You know, I took time off to do nothing because we got to rejuvenate too, because the battles that we're fighting now are different. They're more time consuming. There's so many negative messages that you get, even on social media. I talked to my daughter and she said, Mama, there's some people that are, you know, that don't want to vote. You know, she was like, I just don't understand why they feel that way. And all the things that they're saying, you know, there's so many things that come at us all the time. You know, I want to write an op-ed about race being a social construct, because there are people that are questioning who Kamala Harris is. But if they took a DNA test, they would find out that they're not who they think they are either, because race is definitely a social construct. So it's all of these kinds of things, I feel like I just have to do something. You know, I'm not the kind of person who can sit and not and pretend like it's not happening. So I just have to do something, and then I have those are those times, and I have to go for a walk or find something that will calm my mind. I like to, you know, sometimes at night when I can't sleep, I listen to, you know, I go and find and download like the sounds of the ocean. You know, when I can't go to the ocean, I listen to the ocean because the ocean is calming. Music is very calming too. Depending on the type of music that I listen to. When I used to write poetry, that was my way. That was an outlet. Sometimes I would write, and sometimes I still write. So, or I may just, you know, call up a friend that I haven't talked to in a long time. And I don't watch the news all the time. I cannot watch it 24/7. Mentally, I can't handle it. So for me, it's easier for me to read it, and I choose my sources carefully. I am not gonna, you know, a lot of people reading stuff and they go with it, and it's not even accurate. And it's made to confuse them. So what I try to do is choose reliable sources, and I just read it because it's just mentally, it's just better for me. Some people may be able to watch all that, you know, watch it all the time. And I know people that, like my father was like that. My mother said she had to have a second television in the house because when she said when news when CNN came on, it was 24 hours a day. She said I couldn't even watch my stories. So she had to go and get another television. So, but no, I can't. Those are the things I do to relax, and so I can stay rejuvenated and do this work.
Thank you. As we begin to close out, Ms. Flowers, I just wanted to ask you, in regards to your book that's coming out, could you just, you know, is there anything that you'd want to touch on to let everyone know, like, why this book is so important, and just to double back on, you know, us needing to be more involved in what we don't realize should be a human right for everyone?
But I think the reason why I think the book is so important because, you know, I didn't grow up a person with means. I grew up in a rural community, and I guess what my story is about is how one person can make a difference. And here I am, you know, from Lowndes County, Alabama, in the country where people had to carry water. And I remember we got telephones for the first time. I mean, this wasn't too long ago. In my, I mean, for you all, yes, because you're so young, but for those of us that are in my age group, people just assumed that everybody had, you know, telephones, but that wasn't true in a lot of these rural communities. So and same thing with wastewater and wastewater treatment. So I think the important thing is to show that no matter where you come from, you can make a difference. And coming from Lowndes County and being able to go to Geneva in Switzerland and be on a world stage to talk about wastewater and to talk about poverty. Likewise, to be able to go to Paris and be there during the negotiation of COP21, things that I never could have imagined or dreamed. But my story is that I call myself kind of the Forrest Gump of activism. I mean, in terms of how there were always people along the way to help me, even as a child, to get to where I am. And that's what the story is. It's a memoir. And I think hopefully when people read it, they can be inspired. I wrote it for young people who may feel like right now in this moment that they're just so overwhelmed and they don't know what to do. And hopefully after they read this book, they're inspired and motivated to find their place, whatever that is, and do it.
Thank you so much. Dr. T, what say you?
You know, this is a wonderful conversation, and Ms. Flowers, it reminds me, you gave a wonderful list of self-help and self-care ideas. And so I'm not going to repeat that, but I'm just going to amplify that and say that self-care is also how you keep hope alive. Like, you take care of yourself, that gives you the energy to keep hope, and keep hoping gives you the desire to keep fighting. And so through all of these trials and tribulations, we have to take care of ourselves. And as Ms. Flowers said, you can come from the most meager background and you can still take care of yourself, and you can still have hope, and you can still have a difference. So that would be my thing for today.
Star, you got two things?
Girl, I do, but I mean, this is like really heavy. I mean, thank you. First of all, thank you for the work. That's the most important. Thank you. Gratitude, gratitude, gratitude. The first thing is that I'm consuming this, and my thoughts are that we are still really trying to deconstruct slavery and try to deconstruct the aftermath of plantation capitalism. And that's where we decide who is expendable and who is not, in order to make, money. And, and we don't care about obsolescence, and we don't care about, sustainability. So first is, wow, we are not that far from slavery, and it's real. And we're living with the aftermath and trying to now deconstruct that system that we are still very much a part of. And then the second thing, I mean, the resounding thing that you gave us was, one, get the book, and get active, and do something, because our children's lives, our own lives, and our own sanity, more so probably than anything, rely on that. Go to those Sierra Club meetings, start your own Sierra Club. I know I went to one, and I was like, hold up, everybody in here white, and y'all talking about parks and talking about war, like we don't want a new bike path because but they weren't talking about issues that, hey, they were trying to build a power plant down the street from my house that happened to be an all Black community. And like, hold up, y'all don't care about that, but you care about the bike path. So I think, get involved and get active and make a whole bunch of mistakes, but you'll change somebody's life like you've done. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all for the opportunity. And also the most important thing right now, vote.
Absolutely. And what Ms. Flowers said, it's important that we're voting, like she said early on, is, sometimes even skin folk, that doesn't mean that we don't hold them accountable. We have to hold everybody accountable to the needs that we have. And I think last but not least, just the compassion, like, look to your neighbor, because you don't realize, what may be taking place right here in so many different areas that we never even think of. Someone may not even have water. Someone may not even be able to flush their toilet properly. And these are things that are very important to our communities, and we need to take part and make the changes that need to happen. So we thank you so much for coming to American Therapy. You guys can follow us on all channels, and thank you again, and we out.
Thank you.